Greetings! In this video I'm going to show you how to fit the rear exhaust box to your car at home. Minimal tools, just a little bit of time and a bit of patience, and save yourself a fortune. In this example we're using a Vauxhall Opel Astra G, a 2.2, although the badge says 1.4, and it's time to go and find that leak. Here she blows. She's been sat for a year. There was an advisory that the exhaust was blowing the year prior to that, so this exhaust is going to be pretty knackered. It says 1.4, but it's a 2.2. Why does it say 1.4? Because my wife said, don't get too powerful a car. To that. 2.2 rebadge. Job done. Alright, under we go and have a look at the state of the exhaust. As you can see initially, well, straight away, there's corrosion towards the back box. The underside's not looking too great. You can see the exhaust going over the back axle towards the engine. And that is the rear section of your exhaust. The midsection from here doesn't look too bad. The integrity looks good, so we'll just concentrate on the rear, as that is what the advisory said. And also the guy that's just MOT'd it said, you got a hole in your back exhaust, mate. Your back box. And as you can see there, it's looking pretty sorry for itself. Plenty of corrosion. Again, over the back axle, into the midsection, which looks great. The integrity's good. We won't worry about that whatsoever. That's definitely fine. We're going to head back to the rear of the vehicle with that pesky back box. Now, when most people see this, sorry, bit of a faux pas there. Most people see this, they go, oh my God, how am I going to get that off? It's never going to come off. It will come off. You've just got to be a little bit, systematic about it and take your time. You're going to need some PPE, some safety gear, which I am not using in this video because I'm an arsehole. And here are the other bits and bobs you'll need. A piece of paper is very handy for finding escaping gas. The corrosion's quite bad on the rear pipe, and that is normally worse on the in pipe. As you can see, the rubber bung here is off of the support, which will lead to stress points because the exhaust is designed to move when it's being driven, and from the movement of the engine it has to be held in like a suspension system, hence the rubber. But because that's not on there, it's creating weaker stress points elsewhere on the system. So we have to address that a bit later on. And again, it does look a bit intimidating to some of you guys. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it looks. Some of you are probably wondering how the hell you're going to get the exhaust off when it looks like this, and it's quite simple. It just takes a bit of patience. Sorry, I've got a stinking cold. As you can see here, it's completely shagged. There's rust and crap everywhere. I can actually probably make holes by poking my finger in it, but it's not in a good way. So we know for sure. I can see here also that the spring bolts have been wound on till they're bound, which is never good. Again, why spring bolts? It's to aid and help with movement in day-to-day use of the vehicle. The exhaust has to be able to move, otherwise it causes stress points. Rigid, no good. Midsection, beautiful. Back section, awful. Start the car up. Let's go and have a look. I can hear the blow already. At this point, the exhaust is cold. It's safe to go underneath. It's safe to touch. You should have a mask on, gloves, and also eye protection because of all the flakes of rust and debris and crap that could fall into your eyes, which is a bad thing. Now, looking under here, I can hear the blow substantially. It's definitely in this section. Have a feel around. We'll feel around the flange. Can you hear it? There's your blow. This is where your piece of paper comes in for confirmation, as the exhaust gases will, basically blow on the paper. It's as simple as that. I can also see moisture appearing on the bottom side of the exhaust, which is not a good sign because the moisture should be coming out the tailpipe. Or the condensation, but it's not. It's coming out of this midsection, which would indicate there's a hole. And as you can see, the paper is vibrating away quite happily under the escaping gases force. Again, an audible indicator is to put your fingers around it and listen for the change in sound. And that will confirm there is a hole. So basically, it's got a bloody great hole in it and we have to change it. Indeedy. It does look frightening. It looks like a knackered, crusty kneecap. I don't know, it looks disgusting. And it will put a lot of people off. How on earth am I going to get that off? Easy. Patience and a bit of common sense. Now, one of the biggest problems when taking exhausts off is snapping bolts, because they corrode and the corrosion adheres the bolts to the inside, which is not a good thing. So we're going to take our time and do this. So write down your VIN number or your registration number and go and order a new exhaust. You'll find your VIN number or your identification number here on the Astra, and also within the bottom left area, or should I say the near side or passenger side, inside the windscreen there'll be a plate there. So now we're going to prepare the exhaust for removal. It's intimidating, isn't it? No, it's not. The spring shouldn't be bound on, we've said this. Look at the state of that. It's like an elderly nipple. It's not happy. So we've got to clean all this up with a bit of wire brush and WD-40. Now what I'm going to use things that you would find lying around at home. I've got penetrating oil, I've got the full kit and caboodle, but I'm not going to use it. I haven't even got the red nozzle thing, because everyone loses them, so we're just going to spray the living shit out of it. Yes, that is my finger and not my winky. Although it really is that big. Not. Lag the living crap out of it. And all that by capillary action. When rust and corrosion occurs, it creates fissures and cracks and holes. And it's just natural thing to do is to absorb, well, not absorb, but it funnels and channels moisture into these cracks. So you lag the living crap out of it. I don't care what anyone says with the red nozzle thing. You won't have them. Nobody has them. Just spray the crap out of it. And make sure everything gets into every nook and cranny, because we want to free those bolts up. We do not want snap bolts. So now we're going to bugger off 15 minutes and let the stuff do its stuff. Do its thing. After 15 minutes we come back, and as you can see it looks slightly different. I've taken my punch, I've got a hammer in my other hand, and I'm going to apply shock to these points. And what that will do is the areas that the fluid could not get to, by shocking or tapping, it doesn't have to be too hard, just enough to jolt any debris or any rust inside, so that the fluid, or a bit more fluid, will be able to find the spots it couldn't find before. We're trying to loosen the debris within the joint so the fluid can seep in and lubricate and loosen up those nuts. As you can hear, it's me tapping away. We're going to speed it up a little bit so the taps will sound different. It's gone dark because the phone is on my belly. Two-handed job. Speed up. Sounds like a hungry rat, doesn't it? So I'm tapping away, just trying to gently apply a little bit of shock, a bit of impact, just to loosen the debris inside the joint itself and inside the threaded parts of the bolt and the flange. Spray it with some more gloop. Good old WD-40. Penetrating oil is better, but DD-40 is great. Lag it, lag it, lag it. Oh, hungry? Go and grab a bite to eat. Give it another 10-15 minutes. And then when you come back, you'll find that somebody has driven over your WD-40 can. The wind took it, and my neighbour, the bastard, ran over it. So now I not only do I not have the red nozzle thing, the little tube, I have a shout can of WD-40. So we improvise and we overcome. Just stick it on there. Give it a squish. That's better than a kick in the teeth. These things happen. You're doing this at home. You're not in a garage. So it's time to work the bolts. Give them a quick rub with a wire brush. Trying to get rid of some debris. I'm going in with a 15mm spanner because it's obviously a 15mm bolt. Why not use a socket? Well, initially the spanner will give you a better feel because you have to work the bolt. They could be wedged on tight, but because of all the lubing, look at that. A simple turn. It's loosened almost immediately. Let's just hope the other one's exactly the same. Now, when you work a bolt, in order to not to snap it, I wouldn't use a socket initially. Go in with a wrench or a spanner. 6-point better, but anything that comes to hand, because you're at home, remember? And when we work a bolt, we go to undo it. If it tightens, then you'll go back the opposite direction, and then you'll retry, and you'll find that the bolt will travel a little tiny bit more. So you go back on yourself, apply a bit more pressure, try to undo it. If it tightens up too much, don't force it, go back on yourself. Each time you're going back on yourself, that fluid that's now sitting inside the threads is working its way and loosening it up for you. That sounds really rough. And that one's a lot more easy. As you can see, I'm trying to undo, and it tightens up. So I push it back the other way. Don't rush it, don't force it. Just work that bolt. You'll save yourself. It'll take you a little bit longer, to be fair. You know, but if you inadvertently snap the bolts, it's going to take you a shitload longer. A hell of a lot longer. And it'll be a whole new ball ache. So patience and a methodical approach, and you'll get those bolts off in no time. So again, just working the bolt, forwards, back, and eventually you'll find that the bolt will free itself up.
Lovely piece.
And the resistance will lessen significantly to the point where it will just pop off, and then you can use your socket. Again, you can use a socket on there if you like, but I find the sensitivity or the feeling I get using a wrench on the initial turns is more, well, beneficial if I use the wrench, basically. Sorry about the voice, I've got a stinking cold. I feel like shit. So we just work in the bolts, Oh look, there's the neighbour's house. Hello. Now the bolt should be loose enough for me to get a socket on there. Again, we do this tentatively. You don't go in wrenching away like mad, because you'll snap the bugger. Take your time, gentle pressure. Most of this can be done one-handed, believe it or not. You can change an exhaust pipe with one hand. Pretty much. There you go. As you can see, it's now to the stage where it's freed up beautifully. There's no risk now of the bolt snapping. I can't feel any resistance. The WD-40 has got into all the right places. The spanner has done the initial work, and now the socket will do the rest. Why am I using such a long socket? Well, because again, I'm just trying to simulate how many of you guys at home, you'll just have random tools. Yes, I've got full toolkit, but I'm trying to make it as realistic as possible. I can imagine you running around your kitchen saying, "Darling, have you seen my socket set?" And your wife will say, "What's a socket set?" So we just keep undoing and undoing and undoing. This is the boring bit. I thought I sped this up, to be honest. She's coming away. There you go. That's a most pleasing sound of when a bolt is finally free from the confines of the thread. And out she pops. That's the first one. Now the second one, you can't actually get a socket on there, so it's going to be mostly spanner work because of the angling exhaust. So that is the next one, which was initially an easier one to turn. Back in with the spanner, and I'm not going to bore the living crap out of you. Instead, I think I sped this up. Normally I talk while I'm doing the video. See, it won't fit because of the angle. If I put a smaller socket on there, fine. Maybe a smaller ratchet. But let's do it on the spanner. Obviously this is sped up. I haven't had 25 coffees and some amphetamines. This is just sped up footage. I'm a bit slower than this. But she's free. Oh, satisfying. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Out she comes. 2 bolts, no snappages, nice and easy. Just from a bit of patience and a bit of lube. Now look at the state of that joint. What am I going to do with that? I hear you say yourselves, eh? I hear you say yourself say. That doesn't make sense. I'm trying to illustrate here. You've got to wiggle the exhaust by pushing away from the joint towards the rear of the car, and just you've got rubber bungs on there which will allow you some movement. Wiggle, 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 and then you'll be able to separate the flange like that. If you can see, it's very, very subtle wiggle, 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 and you can see the gasket or donut ring gasket in between the two, because it's not a face-to-face contact. The gasket takes all the brunt, and it's the gasket that forms the seal. Obviously, it goes without saying. So the two flanges do not meet. We're going to undo these rubbers. Undo them? You mean separate them, Andy? Surely. Yes. I've got to push it that way to get it off. This is the one at the rear of the box. The one that wasn't actually hung up a moment ago. I don't know if you remember. It was so long ago. Pull the rubber off. Plop. And then you can now drop the exhaust down on one side. We're going to go back in towards the joint. There's a rubber on the other side. Obviously, when you buy the exhaust, make sure you get a fitting kit, which consists of 2 new spring bolts, the gasket itself, and a set of rubbers. Now, the set of rubbers never arrived in time, so in this instance I'm using the old rubbers when I put it back together, which is not the best. And since the video was filmed, I have now put the new rubbers on. So we just slide that off, and the exhaust will drop. Kerplop. There should be one more rubber at the back, which is holding it in place there, as you can see. And we'll drop that one off, and the exhaust will be pulled from underneath the vehicle. My poor old WD-40. Oh, not good. Rest in peace. But it did its job. There's the last rubber. We've got to push the exhaust to the front of the car for this one and pull the rubber back, and it will separate the two, and the exhaust will be free. Yes, you can hear my daughter in the background. She's got a massive gob and can't stop talking. Give it a wiggle. Wiggling is good. Everyone loves a good wiggle, especially if you're an exhaust. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Wiggle, 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 wiggle. Push it towards the front of the car. And Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt. Look at all that crap on my fingers. Off she comes. Be free. You'll live a long and happy life, exhaust. Thank you for your service. Here's the new exhaust. Looks a bit different. Why does it look different? Because it's upside down. Flip her over and do a side-by-side comparison. Apart from the fact the mounting bars which come off the exhaust, on the new one they look like tiny penises. On the old one they're just straight pieces of metal. It's a pretty good match, I would say. I bought it off a reputable supplier, so I have every faith this is going to fit. So it's just a case of getting the bugger back in there. But while this is out, let's have a look at the exhaust, the old one, and see if we can confirm where these holes are. If you look here, there's a fissure or a split. That will leak gases. Not good. If you look here, there's 2 more holes. Oh my goodness, it's like somebody's gnawed a hole and nibbling bits. Nom 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 nom. Metal-eating monster. 2 holes there, no good. And on the other side, holy mother of God, it's the size of a huge, happy lady of leisure. So now we're going to prepare and clean up the flange on the midsection using the old wire brush, because it's a mess. It's not face-to-face contact, but it is good practice to clean up anything when you do repairs. If there is corrosion on anything you do on a vehicle, clean it up. Try and get it back to its state when it was originally put on the vehicle, which you'll not be able to do, but you can still clean the bugger up. Those rubbers, like I said, need replacing, but in this instance I can't do it. Wire brush. get all the loose debris off. It's the inner lip where the contact point is. The contact face is where my thumb's just been. That is the important bit. It has to be smooth. There's going to be deformations in there. There's going to be lumps and bumps. It's going to be not a uniform profile. I can feel it now. I can feel some lumps and bumps in there. But we've got to get it down as much as we can to give the exhaust a fighting chance of creating a good seal, so we don't get any escaping gases, and all this would have been a waste of time. So a little bit of cleaning up. I'm going to spray some cleaning solution on there. Doesn't matter. It won't do any damage. It's just to clean out any residual gunk. Did you see what was in my hand? That's my wife's bikini bottoms. Well, it's one buttock of them because they're massive, because she's got such a big ass. Get in there and give it a clean. Wipe it all out. Wipe out any contaminants, any crap, any muck. Give it a good old clean up and give it a fighting chance. Look at that. That's handsome. And you think what that looked like a few minutes ago. And now it's smoother than a baby's bottom. That will make a really good mate. The fitting kit and installation is next. There's your 2 new bolts. Shiny. Lovely. And there is your donut gasket or ring gasket, which is steel, I think. Mesh steel. And fire smoke. Do we need that? Not really. Not on this sort of gasket. You don't need it. But what I'm going to use it for is just to seat the gasket, because it's going to be there's going to be a lot of jiggling around and moving around, and it could just fall off or pop off. So by using this, it's just going to literally keep the gasket in place, ready to offer the exhaust up and mount it into the midsection. Very, very simple. Again, you don't need it on this. It's not an essential. I'm just literally using it. It will heat up and expand. It will give off a bit of moisture. But if you smother it too much everywhere, you won't get the bastard off. So you don't need it, like I said, for the 3rd time. It's like a parrot. Here I'm using it just to seat the gasket, keep it in place with the erratic movements of me trying to reposition and relocate the exhaust onto the midsection. It won't do any harm. Look at that lovely face. Oh! Right, it's time to offer up the exhaust. Shiny new exhaust. All these guttural noises coming out of my mouth. There's the penis looking bit on the new exhaust going into the hole. Ooh, suits you, sir. I'm sorry, this is not a porno film, it's just an exhaust movie. In she goes. Bung number 1, the same as when we took it off. It's pretty much a reverse procedure. So we put that one in first to support the weight of the exhaust when we're trying to maneuver the front section into place. I'm just again pointing out, you shouldn't be using old rubbers. You should be using new ones, because they perish and they wear. You know, they cost a couple of quid. It's cheap as piss. And now we've got to get this bugger in as well, into the next rubber, over there. And that will take the weight of the other end of the exhaust, and will leave us free to just wiggle it and move it around until we can marry them up without having to worry about holding the exhaust. You let the hangers or the grommets, rubbers, do the work for you. It's like having an extra pair of hands. It's quite nice. Again, we insert another one of those penis-looking bars into the rubber. On you go. Ooh, suits you, sir. Up onto the mounting bar. Sorry, I'm so snotty. I shouldn't be doing this really. I should be in bed. And now the exhaust is ready to be positioned. As you can see, in its natural state of being suspended on the grommets, it's still quite close, and the alignment's good. I'm very happy. Now with our freshly cleaned midsection face, we have to wiggle and wiggle forwards, push the grommets forward, which allows forward movement towards the engine, and again there, which should allow us to push the exhaust closer and closer to the flange. What a great word. Flange. Flange. Again on this front rubber, we're going to push it along. and you'll see that it is indeed not a face-to-face contact with the flanges on the exhaust sections. It is a gasket to face. Go on, I'm so excited. I'm watching this as I'm talking. Normally I talk while I film, but I'm so tired. And it was a bit windy, and I got stinking cold. Now, had I not put the fire cement or exhaust paste on there, sorry about the fingers, there's a good chance that gasket would have dropped off. Right, so what I've done now is I had to use two hands, so I've put them in by hand. As you can see, they're a bit wiggly. I've just finger tightened them in just to position the gasket and try and lock it into place. As it stands at the moment, if I was to start the car up, gas would piss out everywhere. So what I'm going to do is try and have it set evenly. So I'll put my finger around the back and see if the space between the two faces is even. It's not too tight one side. Again, I'm using the end of a wrench or a spanner. As you can see, that side's not even, a bit more gap. And that also coincides with the fact on the old exhaust that spring was bound on. So somebody hasn't fitted it completely right and just thought, bollocks, it's not the same, I'll wind it on. So we are going to actually bind it on. We're going to slightly over tighten. And another reason for that is because the face has deformations and lumps and bumps. It's not a new exhaust it's going onto. It's a new exhaust onto an existing exhaust. So there will be lumps and bumps. And by gently crushing it, not too much, you're actually slightly crushing it, it will take the form of the imperfections of the midsections flange or inner face. It will just help. Start the car up. As you can see, moisture, lovely, condensation coming out of there now and not out the middle of the pipe, which is what we want. There's wifey's bikini bottoms on the floor. There's no skid marks in them. Isn't that lovely? Look at that. It's so lovely. As you can see, it's the same as with the old exhaust. I've bound it on. So I'm applying heat by turning the car on. I've over-tightened it only slightly. You can't over-tighten these things too much because they're sprung-loaded. A couple of turns on a sprung-loaded bolt, the increase in force is minimal. It's not like doing up a normal bolt. And again, they're sprung-loaded to allow for movement in the exhaust. So there are no fracture or stress points. The exhaust has to be able to move slightly. So I'm just heating it up. So that's going to heat the gasket up. It's going to heat up that cement paste, which is the gasket is sat on. You're going to get a little bit of moisture or fluid. The fluid content from the paste will come out, be like a creamy residue, just so we can get that profile of the face from the midsection, you know, marrying and matching up to the gasket. I've lost my piece of paper, so I'm now using a sweetie wrapper, looking for leaks, which I suspect there will be none because it's tightened down quite well. You should really use a torque wrench on these, around about 40 to 50 newtons, but if you haven't got one at home, it's not a critical measurement. You know, there's quite a lot of play. There's the residue from the exhaust paste, as expected. Give it a wipe with wifey's pants, but there is no blow whatsoever. Isn't that lovely? Now what we do have to do is to back those bolts off slightly. Oh, yep, that's hot. It doesn't take long for an exhaust to heat up. My filthy maulers. Yes, hello. Right, so this is the important bit. Back off the bound spring a few turns until it's no longer bound. If it's bound up, it will be too rigid and you'll cause fracture points, well, not fracture points, stress points, and eventually when it corrodes, it will do the same old thing again. You don't want them bound, you want them apart. So we're going to back it off a little bit. Just a little bit. And then going back to using a wrench and not the socket, because you'll get a feel for the pressure with your hand better with a wrench. I'm feeling now for, is it even? Can I get away with backing it off a bit? I looked at a couple of other Astras the other day, and one of those, well actually two of them were bound up on their exhausts. So I don't know if it's a design flaw, but you can back it off somewhat to allow freedom of movement. use a torque wrench, but I haven't in this case because most of you won't have it. I'm now feeling for leaks. I'm actually blocking the end of the exhaust to add pressure to see if any blows come. Not blocking it too much, using wifey's pants. And that's it, guys. You can do it. Get on with it.